Welcome to another in the series of NJAPM webinars. My name is Carl Cangelosi, and today's presentation is on community mediation by Cheryl Cutrona. Cheryl is the Executive Director of Good Shepherd Mediation Program, Philadelphia's only community mediation center. She is also an adjunct faculty on the adjunct faculty at Temple University, Beasley School of Law, and Klein School of Media and Communication. Cheryl is an advanced practitioner member of the Academy of Family Mediators, and she has been certified as a family trainer by the Academy. She holds a BA from Michigan State University, a master's in library science from Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan, and her JD from Temple University, Beasley School of Mediation. For those of you who are new to Zoom webinars, you may ask questions by using the Q&A or chat functions at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You can get there by placing your mouse at the bottom of the screen. Cheryl will be answering your questions at the end of her presentation. So welcome, Cheryl. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close my video and get off your screen. And the presentation is now yours.
Thank you, Carl. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I've decided to use a PowerPoint presentation because it helps keep me organized. Otherwise, I tend to go off and do a lot of storytelling, which you probably are not interested in hearing today. So my topic for today is community mediation. And Carl had asked me to do a little bit of the history of community mediation in the United States. There was something called the Pound Conference back in 1976. It was held in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was convened by Chief Justice Warren Burger and co-sponsored by the American Bar Association and the Conference of State Chief Justices. They all got together because they were concerned about the length of time it took to get a case in court. Back in those days, it could take up to 6 or 7 years to get a civil case finalized in court. The cost of attorney fees were increasing, and people were feeling like they couldn't afford to have their day in court. So the group got together to try to find some alternatives to the litigation system. They formed a task force, and they were trying to develop proposals for judicial reform. Some of you may have heard of Frankie A. Sander. He was at the law school at Harvard, and he was invited to speak at the Pound Conference. He actually recently passed away in this year, but it was his vision that has really become the basis for the community mediation programs in the United States. He envisioned a multi-door courthouse. I kind of, when you go to the emergency room, a lot of times if, they do medical triage and they can tell whether, if you're bleeding profusely, having a stroke, having a heart attack, they'll send you through right away. Otherwise, you end up sitting in a waiting room until they have time to have a doctor see you. Well, it's the kind of thing that Frank Sander envisioned, that when you went to the courthouse, you would have a sort of legal triage. And what the people at the court would do would be to talk to you a little bit about your case and think about which door, if this were a multi-door courthouse, which door they should send you through. It looked like maybe you could negotiate the situation. They'd send you through door number 1 negotiation. If that failed, then maybe you need someone to help you resolve your dispute, but still keeping it based on self-determination. Perhaps a mediator could help you. Then, of course, sometimes people just can't make the decision on their own, and so they need to have a decider. So you would cross the line and go through one of the doors where there would be someone to help you reach your decision, like an arbitrator, a judge, a jury, whatever. And they were also hoping that only cases of first impression or matters that needed to see a judge would go actually into the courtroom, because they strongly believed that many of the cases that were coming through the system could be decided by the parties and really didn't belong in a courtroom. And so they were assessing and channeling into the most appropriate dispute resolution forum. We all know the term ADR, which stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. Many of us feel that it should be appropriate ADR, Appropriate Dispute Resolution. So from that meeting, they decided that they wanted to have a speedier resolution at a lower cost in a less formal forum that would be more accessible for people to access justice. They wanted to also be sure that the quality remained, even though it wouldn't be the traditional system. So part of the outcome of that Pound conference was the Department of Justice funding 3 neighborhood justice centers, and that was way back in 1978. Atlanta, Kansas City, and Los Angeles all got community mediation centers that were nonprofit. They were staffed by trained volunteer mediators so that folks who had cases that could be resolved in that way would go to a community mediation center. The next year, I think they came up with a couple more. I know one was in Hawaii. But since then, since 1978, community mediation centers have cropped up all over the country. Community mediation today there's a professional association called the National Association for Community Mediation, and every couple of years they do a State of Community Mediation report. I've put on the PowerPoint presentation the website, which is www.nafcm.org, and they're in the process right now of gathering information for a new state-of-the-art report. The most current one, though, was in 2011, and at that point they had guesstimated that there are about 400 neighborhood justice centers in the United States today. It used to be about 550, so we're declining, and I think that may have something to do with the difficulty currently in getting grants. Those of us who are nonprofits have to do a lot of fundraising, and in some situations it has gotten to the point where, because we're small, because we're difficult to fund, it's becoming increasingly difficult to sustain ourselves, particularly keeping up with technology and everything else. The larger the center, the more mediations you need to do. And because we don't want to charge a lot of money, because our mission is to provide free and low cost mediation, if you're not bringing money in other than through fundraising in order to support yourself, it's very difficult. But the state of the art in 2011, there were about 400 centers with over 1,300 in staff. All combined, they estimate that there's over 20,000 volunteer mediators that are resolving or at least addressing over 400,000 disputes annually, and that 900,000 people are served annually. So before this movement began, 7 years was sort of the norm to get a civil case through. Now, if you go to mediation in a community mediation center, you can have your dispute heard within a month or less, depending on how difficult it is to schedule all the parties. One of the things now, instead of seeing bar journals articles about how long it is or the litigious nature of the United States, you're seeing covers with articles about the Vanishing Trial. They guesstimate that most of the cases that at least go to federal court are resolved prior to actually going through the courthouse door. The National Association for Community Mediation has sort of been our sort of traditional resource for how to set up and how to navigate the community mediation journey. And they have 9 hallmarks that they consider that every community mediation center should strive for. The first one is that it should be community-based. Most of us are. Some of them are faith-based. Some of them are located in universities. Some of them are strictly volunteer, but most of us are private nonprofits that are separate from other agencies, although because of the funding crisis, many of the organizations have gone from being standalones to becoming part of a public agency or some other program where they can find a free house and some sort of administrative funding to keep us going. But typically there's some sort of governing or advisory board that sort of runs or governs the community-based mediation center. The mediations are typically assigned a trained volunteer mediator. The other hallmark is that it should be open, that the use of trained community volunteers should be open to all people that want to come in and mediate, regardless of their ability to pay. So accessible, providing direct access to the public, but also trying to reduce barriers by having a diverse staff of volunteer mediators who can provide services, accessible services, regardless of ability, language, cultures, all kinds of, and income level. So we strive to be able to do that. Low cost, at Good Shepherd, our program is a sliding scale. It's a little different than private practitioners, because private practitioners typically charge by the hour, whereas at Good Shepherd, I've convinced our governing board that we should use a per session rate so that we're not shooing people out the door if they can't pay for another hour. And we never turn away anyone for inability to pay. Our fee-based services are provided on a sliding scale basis. If someone is eligible for legal aid or free legal services through legal aid, we don't charge those clients anything to access mediation here at Good Shepherd. If they do have some income, or they're above the funding, the federal poverty guidelines that are used by the legal aid agencies, then we start at $25 per session, and it slides all the way up to around $350 per session. I will tell you that the majority of our services are at the low end of that sliding scale, mostly actually for free or $25. And we don't check, unless you're doing a divorce and custody mediation where your assets become public knowledge in the mediation, we don't check anyone's income. We take their word for it. So also inclusive, they want to be sure that all community mediation centers provide services without any kind of discrimination, obviously, for any of the reasons that we all know. And then also that mediation centers are able to provide services at the earliest stage of conflict. I know when you go to law school, you learn about whether or not a case is ripe for court. Well, it's kind of that way with mediation too. There can be people who come who call for mediation the day after they broke up and they want a divorce mediation. I would think that even though that's an early stage of the conflict situation, wanting the divorce, that it might need to simmer a little while before it actually walks in the mediation room, mediation center. But we do try to provide conflict resolution at the earliest stage of the conflict that it makes sense. Of course, our hands are tied because we don't go out and, pluck them from the streets. That, we can only do them when they walk in the door. And in many cases that do come to the mediation center, things have been brewing for a very long time. It's not like we get cases that come in after, very quickly. A lot of times people have to simmer and think about it before they even come up with the idea to try community mediation. We try to be innovative as a community mediation center. We have had several different innovative programs here at our mediation center in Philadelphia. We have used various different ideas that have come from the court and from the legal system to start new programs. For example, the district attorney's office came to us way back in the early 80s and asked us to be involved by providing using our conflict resolution skills, putting together a diversion program for juveniles who've had their first scrape with the law. We have also been invited to provide facilitated pre-hearing conferences at dependency court. Neither of those things were contemplated when we first started the mediation program, but over the years our service menu has expanded based on agencies and the court's desires to provide new programs to address situations that we can help. We do so many different training of volunteer mediators. We've been able to come up with a lot of different training and consulting services. Another innovative thing that we've come up with here at Good Shepherd is something called conflict coaching. We're fortunate we live in Philadelphia, where Trish Jones lives, and she wrote the book Conflict Coaching. She's been involved with our center since 1992 as an evaluator of our peer mediation programs. So when she came out with conflict coaching, I thought that might be an opportunity to serve some people who would like to mediate, but the responding party says no. As the NJAPM has said in previous State of Community Mediation reports, only about a third of the people who actually call and request mediation get to the mediation table. And so back in the day, we were turning 2/3 of our potential customer base away, not being able to provide them with any service if the responding party declined the invitation to mediate. Now, we will offer them the opportunity to meet one-on-one with a conflict specialist who can do some conflict coaching with them to help them build a bridge from where they are now to where they would like to be. Even though they can't mediate, they can create their own plan of action to address the situation without actually coming to mediation. So we now have another service that wasn't even envisioned when we started our center in 1984. We're outcome oriented to a certain extent. We do facilitate and educate the community for collaborative relationships. Right now, we're in the process of working with Drexel University Law School to try to put together talking circles in West Philly to address public safety needs. So we're expanding beyond just the regular mediation and dispute resolution processes into encouraging conversations using the circle process that informs our restorative practices services. So we're looking for new ways to work with the community, even if it isn't in the traditional one-on-one mediation that we're all familiar with. Newsworthy, yeah, sometimes. We try to engage the public about what we're doing and the value of using mediation and the practice of mediation. Sometimes we get more press than others, but we do our best to be available to the community. And sometimes people, though, say that we're the best kept secret in town. Pennsylvania, there's community mediation centers all over Pennsylvania. And when I Googled community mediation centers in New Jersey, I couldn't find any. So I'm not sure if New Jersey has followed the same path as Pennsylvania, but right now there are at least 9 community mediation centers that are members of the Pennsylvania Council of Mediation. There may be a few others, but these are the ones that are front and center and that you are searchable through the pamediation.org website, so that anywhere in Pennsylvania, if you need a mediator, you can search for one using the directory that's online. Anyone who becomes a member of the Pennsylvania Council of Mediators has their name added to the online directory so that folks know that who they are, where they are, and what services they provide. But in Philadelphia, we started in 1984, and we are still the only community mediation center offering community mediation services to Philadelphia. And we have a pretty standard mission. If you looked at the missions of some of the other centers, they're all fairly similar in terms of wanting to encourage peace and social justice using mediation. We have also included restorative practices and other things like conflict coaching, facilitated dialogue, and other more innovative services that have been added more recently since when we originally started the program. It started in 1984 with a Sister of the Good Shepherd, which is why we're called Good Shepherd Mediation Program. She did a needs assessment when she was a Bryn Mawr Law and Social Policy graduate student, and determined that the neighbors in the Northwest Philadelphia were particularly concerned about unresolved disputes that involved youth. They may still be concerned about that, but over the last 35 years, we've expanded from the 2 little police districts in Northwest Philadelphia to serving the whole city. We have broadened our services. Most community mediation centers that are not just small volunteer centers that just provide mediation only. We provide community mediation, but we've expanded to provide services to families in transition. We do some juvenile justice initiatives, and because of the training that we developed to train mediators, both adult mediators and peer mediators in the school, we now have a full menu of training and consulting services that we can offer the community. I love this cartoon. I thought I would put it in. Mediation at the OK Corral. Oftentimes the mediators feel like they have to find common ground. And sometimes you feel like the town isn't big enough. It says, so you both agree this town isn't big enough for the 2 of you. Well, I think that shows we're making progress here. Sometimes as a mediator, it's not real easy. A lot of attorneys come to take our training and say they're recovering attorneys. They want to do mediation because they think it's more peaceful. Well, when you've got intransigent or intractable mediation participants, sometimes even though you're trying to be facilitative and a peacemaker, it's a little more challenging than that. Here's another, if you've got conflict, a lot of times in the community, we do neighborhood disputes that are sort of, I call them over the fence mediations, parking and barking cases. Typically, community mediation centers around the country do pretty much the same kinds of cases that we do, things between neighbors. Just like in court, we do small claims, landlord-tenant. We do some employment discrimination disputes, and resolution from the people actually getting to the table. Our statistics almost every year demonstrate that about 85% of the cases that get to the table settle in the community mediation section. It's been pretty consistent over the last 35 years. We get cases, like most mediation centers around the country, through self-referrals. People will call us because they've seen our website or someone has used mediation and they recommend mediation. We get referrals from the legal aid community because many of them that receive federal funding can only serve people within a certain percentage of the federal poverty guidelines. If the people have too many assets or too much money, whatever, they might refer them to Good Shepherd because they may not want to go to court, they may not be able to afford to hire an attorney, but they can still afford a sliding scale at Good Shepherd Mediation Program. So some of our referrals are from legal aid. We get referrals from various government agencies like the Department of Recreation, of course, family court, other nonprofit organizations in the community, particularly those that have members or organizations that serve people living in community, like shelters and other low-income housing situations. We get referrals from the police and just about, I can't even list everything, but those are the main sources of referrals that we get and that most community mediation centers receive. Who are the volunteer mediators? They're people who have been taken our 24-hour training or someone else's training, and they can provide a certificate of completion. All of our mediators have to complete an apprenticeship, which involves some sort of an observation of an actual mediation. They have to co-mediate when they're ready with an experienced mediator, And afterwards, we debrief to give them sort of a critique of what went well, maybe what didn't go so well, what they might like to do differently in the future. And because they don't do a ton of cases with us, we try to remind them of the mediator skills and techniques so that they can, it's like I can teach them in training, but until they understand as a mediator when to use them, they haven't really institutionalized the mediation process in their minds. A lot of times I feel like we're sort of a boot camp for private practitioners. People will come to Good Shepherd, take the training, and then go on to, hang their shingle and mediate as a private practitioner. Also at Good Shepherd, because oftentimes they'll be called to do family mediations that involve children, they have to submit criminal and child abuse clearances to stay on our roster, and they also have to engage in continuing mediation activity and do, at least a few cases a year in order to stay on our roster. From year to year, the number varies. We typically have between 40 and 60 people listed as volunteers, but when we send out requests to get volunteers scheduled, a lot of times we're really only using the people who are available in the time slots that where mediations are scheduled. So that narrows it down. We have probably closer to 25 mediators who are regulars that always commit and always show up and do the mediations. We also do multi-party mediation in situations where there's more than just a couple stakeholders. Some of the recent cases that we've had have been within city agencies, within university departments, intra-organizational, sometimes inter-organizational disputes, housing places where there's cooperative housing, collaborative housing, those types of homeowners associations, those kinds of cases where it may be more than just one or two people, but a whole group of people. We also do a multi-party and group facilitation training, and the volunteers that are assigned to those cases have to either have completed it or be co-mediating with someone who has completed the multi-party process. We also facilitate meetings for groups just to help them, help make it easier. We provide facilitative dialogues. There's a number of different types of processes that we use. It depends on the convener who has invited us to come in and facilitate. We do a needs assessment to determine which process might be most appropriate for the given situation. And some of those are town meeting styles. We do a lot of circle processes. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the book by Kay Pranis called The Little Book of Peace Circles. Well, Kay is actually coming in February of 2019 to provide the training here. I've been providing it for years, but we thought we would bring her in because she's the expert. We also use the new interaction method of facilitated collaborative problem solving. Some of us have been trained in appreciative inquiry, so we can do meetings based on that philosophy. And then we also help out in situations where the group needs a retreat or strategic planning, those kinds of facilitations. Again, I've already mentioned conflict coaching, and that is based on the book by Dr. Jones at Temple University. And we try to offer that, conflict coaching workshop once a year. It's 40 hours. We do not teach it as an advanced training. But Trish is always the main co-trainer, and we try to offer that to our volunteers so that when we do assign, when someone does accept our invitation to be involved in conflict coaching, the people that we're assigning are trained conflict managers. I mentioned that we also do the Family Passages Initiative, which serves families in transition. Of course, it's divorce and custody mediation, where we have division of property, all of the things that go into divorce and custody. And the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania has recently reauthorized parenting coordination, which they stopped in 2011 or 12, I think, and now it's back. It'll start again in March 2019. So we're in the process of creating a new workshop that meets the current court rules for parenting coordination. Our divorce and custody mediation training also meets the court rules in Pennsylvania. so that the mediators who take our training will be able to accept court-referred custody mediations in Pennsylvania. We also do parent-youth mediation in situations that are referred by the schools. Sometimes family members will call us and ask us to mediate around home issues. Sometimes they're upset with their kids about missing curfew, who they're hanging around with. Maybe they suspect that they're dabbling with drugs, whatever. We do parent-youth mediations. They used to all be referred by Department of Human Services, not so much anymore, but anyone who calls in for parent-youth mediation, we offer that. We try to assign a co-mediation team involving an adult mediator and a teen mediator that's been trained in one of our youth mediation programs. We're not always able to do that, but we do our best to make sure that that's available to people who would like it. We recently started elder dispute services, probably within the last 5 or 10 years, helping families transition older family members to age gracefully, helping them either stay in their homes or transition to a more restrictive setting. We do a lot of cases where there's a lot of siblings. We use sort of a multi-party model for that, where the siblings get together. We try to make sure that the older adult has a voice. And if they are uncomfortable being there alone, we make sure that they have a support person that can help them benefit as much as possible. I mentioned also that we have pre-hearing conferences at Dependency Court. It's a unique service not a lot of community mediation services offer, but we do, and on average, we do about 1,800 pre-hearing conferences a year, serving somewhere around 15,000 folks every year. They reach at least a partial agreement in about 91, 92% of the cases held. There's some that are no agreement. There's a lot that are no action because some of the parties don't show up. But we have 2 mediators on duty every day that the court is open to provide that service for family court. School-based services, a little bit of everything: peer mediation, school attendance mediation, restorative practices. Once a year, we provide a youth mediator training during the summer. It's free. We offer that as sort of our gift to the community, but also so that the schools have a forum for training more students to engage in their peer mediation program, as the students who were already trained sort of, they graduate and move on, they need to refresh their mediator pool. So we offer this training every summer here at Good Shepherd. You know what peer mediation is. I'm not going to go into it, but it's for mediations at school. Peer-to-peer, the kids mediate the cases. Juvenile justice initiatives, again, not all community mediation centers offer this service. We do because our DA's office had invited us to do it. So we've been providing that since the 80s. And like I said, we also do a lot of training and consulting that derived originally from our basic mediation training for people from the community who would like to become mediators. We offer training for attorneys on how to represent your client in mediation, and everything that I've already mentioned, these various trainings. All of our trainings are listed online, and we send out email blasts so that folks know when the trainings are coming up, and they can register right online to take those trainings. Since I've been director, I like to travel, so I've gotten involved in some international programs. Not a lot of community mediation centers do this, but we've just been blessed with various opportunities around the world to offer services. Shortly after apartheid ended, Dr. Tricia Jones wrote a grant that was funded. And what we did was we did training to provide our Community Peace and Safety Network projects here in Philadelphia to people in South Africa. And we also had our peer mediator training manual translated into Zulu and Afrikaans. It was a great opportunity. I myself got to go over several times to do training, and some of the partners came here to America to do the training originally, and they came back again to publicize what we had done at various professional association conferences. I had the opportunity to train at the University of Guam. We were invited by Anafa Malek, which is the Conciliation Center there, to provide training, and we also participated in several of their professional conferences. And I think it was 2008, we put together a pilgrimage of local mediators through the Association for Conflict Resolution. We brought mediators to Israel to just listen, just being a play on the word justice. We weren't there to resolve anything. We were there to test our neutrality and learn firsthand what was going on there, rather than only hearing the things that are filtered by the news media. We brought a multicultural interfaith group of 22 American mediators, and we listened. And I brought a student with us. We got grants to bring her, and she did a 50-minute documentary, which, if you'd like to see, I think it's a great documentary. I don't know if you want to, but if you want to watch it, it's available on our YouTube channel. You can just Google Stories from the Green Line or Good Shepherd, and I'm sure it'll come up on a list. So if you want to watch it, you can. As part of that trip to Israel, I met the person who's the director of Mosaica, and they invited us to come and do conflict coaching training through the U.S. Embassy in Israel. And we trained volunteer mediators from 16 Israeli community mediation centers, and they now use our conflict coaching model in Philadelphia or in Israel. And then we went back with Trish Jones to do advanced training a couple years later and trained even more people. So if you'd like to learn more about our Community Mediation Center, you can go to www.phillymediators.org. If you'd like to contact me directly, our phone number is 215-843-5413. I'd be happy to speak with you. And Carl, are there any questions that you'd like me to focus on? I know we have about 20 minutes or so left for questions and answers.
Yes, a few things. First, I'm really impressed with the breadth of the services that you offer. It's a tremendous amount. How many people do you have doing this? How many sort of full-time versus volunteers? Because it's so many things, it's hard to imagine how you get this all accomplished.
Well, in my heyday, I had about 12 people. Right now, we only have 3 full-time professional staff and 2 support staff. We use a lot of paid contract mediators to help us with training and to facilitate the pre-hearing conferences at Dependency Court. And like I said, a nice cadre of volunteer mediators who come in to do the community mediation and the divorce and custody cases.
Do you find that the field is growing, or is it sort of contracting?
Like I said, NJAPM a few years ago said that there were about 550 mediation centers, but now there are closer to 400. I know there have been several mediation centers in Pennsylvania that have gone out of business. It's not easy these days to keep us funded because we don't provide, basic human services like food, shelter, things where most of the money is going for these days. When I first started at Good Shepherd in the late 80s, early 90s, I could write I'd write 10 grants and get 8 or 9 of them. Now I write 10 grants and I'm lucky if I get 1. If I ask for 50,000, I'm lucky if I get 2,000. After 9/11, the number of community mediation centers and nonprofit organizations in general proliferated because we want to bring peace and social justice to the world. But unfortunately, the income or the interest rates plummeted at the same time. So the foundations who work off their interests, not their principals, to give grants. So as a result, we have more nonprofits that are wanting the money and less money to distribute. So now it's really tough to get money. And I think that a lot of community mediation centers have sort of faced the brunt of that social condition. And a lot of mediation programs are struggling to stay solvent.
How big a budget do you have?
Ours is now only about $500,000 a year, about $500,000 a year. And that's tough to stay funded.
And so those all come through grants?
Well, fortunately, I've been able to build a very strong training and consulting department here. And so we probably make more money training than we do in grants from year to year. We've also been fortunate that about somewhere between 45 and 50% of our budget is government contracts. And not all centers have that. So we've been fortunate that our city appreciates us and is willing to contract with us to provide the services that we offer.
Well, as you found out, I don't know of any community mediation centers in New Jersey, just none.
I Googled, I couldn't find one. There used to be one in South Jersey near the shore, but I don't remember the name of it and I could not find it online. So I am not 100% sure, but it's my understanding that New Jersey has more court annexed mediation than it does community mediation centers in any case.
That's true, but they're usually for mediators who are getting paid more or less their regular fee, which is far in excess of what you were talking about.
Right.
How big it sounds like it would be a tremendously difficult thing for an organization to establish a community mediation program in New Jersey. Would that be true?
It depends. If you've got the government behind you, the courts behind you. I do remember, and it wasn't in this 2011 one, but back in one of the previous NAFCM State of Community Mediation, they mentioned some sort of trend. It's probably not on the website anymore because it's old. But the centers that were more likely to stay in business are those that receive a steady stream of court referrals. A lot of, now we don't have district justices in Philadelphia, but many of the other communities in Pennsylvania have district justices. And when community mediation centers can make inroads with them, that's a strong referral source. Because it's the same kind of cases that we would be doing in mediation that don't really, parking and barking cases really do not belong in the courtroom. And so if district justices are willing to make referrals to community mediation centers, you can, keep that up and running.
All right. Typically, where are sessions held?
Most of them are held here at Good Shepherd. We used to be out in Germantown, and it was tough to get to. And so when that property, it was owned by the Sisters of Good Shepherd, and we didn't have to pay any rent. Now, when the convent closed and we had to move, we moved down to the art museum area, and we have beautiful space where it's easy to park. It's very light and airy. We got a donation that enabled us to build a very comfortable training room with all the amenities that we need to do our services. So even the multi-party mediations can be accommodated here at the Mediation Center. And we have a couple of mediation rooms where we do the smaller sessions. So we do go out to neighborhoods if we're requested. We also go to schools. But in general, now that we're downtown, most of the cases come to the Mediation Center.
Because you're offering these services on a sliding scale, some of them free, do you get any opposition from the bar because you're taking business away from regular paid mediators or attorneys?
Not really. I think that when we used to offer divorce and custody mediation for free, the folks that did family mediation kind of came to us and said, look, you need to charge for this. So we started a fee structure for that. A lot of the cases that we get, they don't want anyway because they know the value of them isn't going to pay their fees. In fact, a lot of the law students that I've had over the years are one of our referral sources because they understand the benefit and the value of having a community mediation handle the case. And in our divorce cases, we encourage all of the clients, the divorce participants, to engage a private attorney to be their sort of divorce coach throughout the process. and do the actual legal filing, because we don't do, unauthorized practice of law. We don't do the legal work involved, the filing. We always refer them to their attorneys if they have quadros or they have other need other financial expertise. So we work with attorneys on those cases.
Okay, here's a question. Let's see. First of all, it says, community meet, Cheryl, an amazing presentation. Community mediation is close to my heart, and I have constructed many centers in my mind since I became a mediator. What is your biggest advice to us if we, NJAPM, decide to open a center such as yours?
I would say do a needs assessment in your community, get some buzz going so people know what you're thinking about, and put a business plan together like you would for any other business that you would start. Maybe if you're an attorney, you can do the 501c3 paperwork on your own, but if not, there's volunteers at some of the universities that can help you so that you can accept grants. That would be my best advice, but don't just do it on a wing and a prayer. Make a plan.
Make a plan. That's good for almost everything in life. Well, I want to thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. It's amazing how another state can be so rich in mediation services, where in New Jersey we're relatively poor.
Well, I'm surprised because we're just across the bridge. If it works here, it would certainly work in New Jersey. Somebody's just got to get going.
I guess we have
to happen.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All righty, bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.